I can remember sitting there and people walking by and they saw right through me. They didn't see me on the street corner, on the bus stop, and I will never forget how that makes you feel. It's so dehumanizing to know you're invisible.
The margins don't get erased by simply insisting that the powers that be erase them.
Crystal, I'm so happy to see you again. I haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah.
And I'm really anxious to hear how you're doing and what's going on in your life. But I hoped maybe we could kind of start at the beginning, if that would be all right, and just share a little bit about your story with us.
Okay, so I grew up in Edmond. My dad was a really bad alcoholic, and my mom was a very angry mom, and so I kind of grew up in a war zone.
Crystal, did you know that all along? Did you know that you didn't have your family?
Yes, I knew something was missing. I didn't get to be a kid too much. I grew up really, really fast. I was like 8 months pregnant when I graduated, and so I walked across the stage with a big belly. My family was super disappointed in me, and at that point in time, I didn't even care about graduating. I just wanted to be away from my family, and so Draven, that was my son, he died 10 minutes after he was born in my arms. I pulled the IVs out of my arm and I left the hospital, and I just plunged into my meth addiction from there. Really, really bad. And
what did you say when you started using drugs?
No, I started using marijuana when I was 12, and I started using meth when I was 14. So I left one abusive relationship and went right into another one. I didn't know that I was going into another abusive relationship because like the first year was really, really awesome. I got pregnant with Felix, and that was the first time he put his hands on me. He took me out, and I was probably about 3 months pregnant or so when that happened. So I brought Felix home, and it was so horrible. I will never forget the day I brought him home.
Which should be the most joyous day.
It was horrible. It was horrible. I got pregnant with Kennedy almost immediately. My kids are 13 months apart.
Where were you living at this point?
So this is the house where the house was that I brought my kids home to from the hospital. My husband and I, we lived here for a really long time. I'm not even quite sure, but this was like a shop of horrors for me. I'm so thankful that this house doesn't exist anymore. I mean, I still battle some of that today, you know, and I think I might the rest of my life. I don't know if that part ever completely goes away, but the bruises would heal, you know, in a couple of weeks, and you wouldn't see that part, but the rest of it stayed with me. By then, the domestic violence was just outrageous.
Had you tried to leave?
Yeah, I did. I tried to leave, and at that point in time, like early on, my family was still trying to help me, but I would go back. We were living in an apartment, and he was coming down. He barricaded me and the kids in the apartment, and he would not let us out, and it was for like days. And
for days?
Yeah, for days. And I was trying to move the dresser out from the front door so that me and the kids could get out. And he woke up and he stabbed me with a screwdriver. And
he stabbed you with a screwdriver?
Yes.
And left you, or?
Yeah, well, my son got a hold of a phone and called 911. So the state came to me and they said, if you don't press charges, we're gonna take your kids. And so I did. And he went to prison. I went and stayed with a best friend of mine and took my kids. And she had a cousin of hers that was staying in the garage, and he was really addicted to meth. Well, she found some needles in the garage and he blamed me, so she kicked me out. And I had nowhere to go, and I knew I was gonna end up on the streets. So I gave temporary guardianship of Felix and Kennedy to her. I will never forget the first night that I slept on the streets. It was at a little church downtown that I drove by there the other day, and it doesn't exist anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. So we curled up on the back porch, and it was pouring rain that night. And we found like a blanket, I guess, that was already on the porch, and we covered up with it. And I remember my feet were sticking out, so when I woke up that morning, my socks were all wet. There's actually tunnels that we would stay in until it rained, because when it rained, it would flood. It's probably a couple of people that live right there, but yeah, that's where I've stayed under there too. So yeah, make sure you duck really far because he's hurt. So there were like several people that stayed out here with us, and we just kind of divided it so that we did kind of have our own space, you know, but we were like family, so like when everybody had food, we'd come together and bring, you know, food or drugs, and we would share. And it's not a house like a traditional house, but this was my house. This was my home. This is where I was safe. This is where I brought my safe people.
What did you have? Did you have a mattress?
We had,
did you have a blanket?
yeah, sometimes we had mattresses, other times just a blanket and a pillow, you know, and I would just sleep. And when I was so strung out, like sleep, when I say sleep, it's not like normal sleeping. I mean, I would be out for days and days, like sometimes. And when your body gets that tired and not taking care of yourself, I mean, I could pass out on the sidewalk and not even care. We had like an area that was for your restroom, and like, I know that's weird, but that's just how it was, so that it wasn't here. Yeah, and we would bring water. We can go like to Brahms or that gas station right there on the corner, and they have a faucet that we could use, and we'd fill up like water jugs and cart them back here.
Can I ask you how you survived? Money-wise,
yeah.
how did you eat? How did you get drugs?
So I stole cars and broke into abandoned houses. Like, I know this is gonna sound really weird, but I would never break into a house that I knew a family lived in. And, you know, so my thinking was all kinds of sick and twisted. I hadn't been homeless very long, and I was walking with two friends of mine, and they had been homeless for a long time at that point in time. And I remember some people coming out of this doorway, and I was walking a little bit behind them, and the ladies, they looked at them just horribly, and they didn't look at me any different than, you know, just a normal person. And I just remember how it made me feel. It upset me so much, and I totally didn't handle the situation correctly because I was angry. But I asked them, and I wasn't nice about it, I asked them why they looked at my friends any different and not at me. I was like, I'm homeless too. So we're off of 19th and May, Northwest 19th and May in the Crestwood edition, in the median. And when I was homeless, there used to be a lot of rose bushes in these medians. And so all my life, like, I used to build flower beds and maintain them. I love plants. And I would come through here with clippers and like deadhead all the rose bushes at night, and it makes the roses bloom again.
Did any of your friends think that was kind of kooky?
Yes, all of them did. I was like the only person that, like, in my group that did that, but they grew to accept it. They knew that was just what Crystal did.
Would this have been a neighborhood that you knew exactly where the schools were?
Yeah, and there's not one too close to here, but yeah, I knew where, in all my areas that I went, I knew where the elementary schools and stuff were, and I tried to stay as far away from them as possible. And the reason I did that is I can remember before I realized that it was a problem for me, you know, the kids would be out at recess and stuff, and it would just kill me because that's what I wanted, was to be with my kids, and I didn't even know how to get back there and stop the cycles that I was in. But I quickly learned where all the elementary schools are, and I avoided them as much as possible. So I ended up being on the streets for about 6 years. I didn't really have any contact with my kids. I wound up a couple of more times in jail. That's when I found out my mom had my kids. I got served with paperwork from DHS in jail, and that's how I found out that they weren't with my friend anymore.
How did you feel about that?
I felt horrible. I felt like the biggest, worst person in the whole world. But I knew my mom had my kids, and I knew they were safe. And so I knew as soon as I got out what I was doing. I walked literally 2 blocks to a store and went in the bathroom and got high. I walked probably halfway from El Reno to the city, and I got a ride with, I don't know, someone picked me up. You know, he told me a little bit about his story and about where his life was now in comparison to how it had been. And I was like, oh wow, maybe someday I can do that. And you know, I had told him.
It's a mysterious way to get a message,
yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah. There were lots of those God moments, and I didn't see them then when I was on the street, but I do now. That story, it did something. It did something to my heart because it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same. I wanted to get sober and I wanted to not be homeless, but I had no idea how to do that.
I met Crystal about 6 or 7 years ago. And when I met her, I remember she had a lot of energy and she was very excited to make some changes in her life. But I don't think she really understood what exactly she needed to change to make her life different. I think that there was some aspects of her story that were really hard and traumatizing for her. And in her mind, she was going to put those things behind her and just move forward. But we all know that it can be very difficult to put the past behind us. And sometimes the actual step we need is to address all of the things that happened before to get us to the place we are before we can move forward.
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
so this is a cell.
this is making my heart race.
Yeah, it is mine too. A lot. Yeah, usually you'll have a mat for each of the bunks and a roll of toilet paper and some books. And, you know, if your family's sending you stuff, you'll have paper and pencils to write.
Okay.
But, yeah, other than, like on the weekends, you don't get out for rec. You're in here, locked down. And,
Weekends lockdown.
Yeah, for 2 days.
And no televisions or
No,
ideas
nothing.
that other people have about what this
Nope,
might be like?
Not at all. Like that's the phone right there. You can call out. You use your pen to call out, and you got a toilet. And yeah, this is it.
And so you would spend your time reading?
Yeah,
Are you a good reader?
I read the Bible a lot, and I read a lot of books this last time about God. That's what I did. And then during the week, like I said, I was lucky. I got out for commissary. They'd come and get us about
what kind of hours would that be? So
like 6 or 6:30 till 3 or 3:30, something like that.
Nice.
So
And then what time do they ever turn the lights out?
This light'll dim, but it never goes out. And I can remember I had some pictures my mom mailed me, and I would hang them on the wall. You hang them with toothpaste. Like you take a little tube of toothpaste and put it on there. That's what all this white stuff on the walls is dried toothpaste. It'll make stuff hang on the wall. I would have my kids. I had a picture of my kids because I slept on the bottom. How does this make you feel?
It's scary. It makes me feel lonely and frightened and
Yeah, it is. It's
a complete lack of privacy. And
Yeah, and like a guard will come through every hour and they just look in the window to make sure everybody's alive or, you know, whatever, and then that's it. And then they come and feed you at 4 o'clock in the morning, between 12 and 1 at lunch, and 5 or 6 for dinner.
So this combination between loneliness and yet you're constantly surrounded by noise and people and things. How do you deal with that? How do you?
You get used to it.
Okay.
You just, I don't know. I remember the first time I came into jail when I came up here, the noise at night, because it gets loud, and people, they'll talk under the doors across the pod to each other.
Yeah.
It used to drive me crazy. And then this last time I was here 8 months, and you get used to it. I got a Bible, and I read. Anytime I was in here, I was reading. And this is where I found God, and I actually took him with me when I left. But I can remember I was here so long, and I had so many cellies come in and out, and I had like little Bible studies in here, and I got an AA book. One of the guards gave me an AA book, and so I started holding AA meetings. But I just started, as many cellies as I had, I wanted to know their stories and where they came from and why they were here. And we're all different people, but the cycles are all the same. Domestic violence, drug use. This started in my family for generations, like lack of education, and girls that are in their late teen, like 18, 19, 20 years old, and they have babies, and they don't have a high school education, and it's a vicious cycle. And I started noticing that because I would just ask the same questions to my new cellies. I knew this last time that I got arrested, I was ready to be sober, and I was ready to not be homeless anymore. I just had no idea how to do that. And I knew God existed. I was just really angry at him for the things that had happened in my life. And I just asked him to show up. I said, show up and help me figure out how to do this right, and I'll spend the rest of my life showing people your love. And because there's so many people, that's what they need.
And it was here on the last visit that you learned about Remerge.
Yes. I had been here probably maybe four months or so when I learned about Remerge, because they were trying to send me to prison for 7 to 10 years, and I wouldn't sign. Like, I knew if I went to prison, I was just going to learn more of this life that I hated. And when I found out about Remerge, I told myself, I'm not signing until I get this program. I'll sit here. If I have to sit here for 2 years to get this program, that's what I'm going to do. Because I knew there'd be a chance that I could see my kids again. At that point in time, it wasn't even about me yet. It was about, I wanted my kids back in my life, and I knew this program would help me get my kids back in my life. Then I found out about the Remerge program. I made up my mind I would sit in Oklahoma County as long as it took to get this program. I sat 8 months in the county, and I stayed sober, and I watched God move in my life and through me in a jail cell. I didn't want to die anymore. I just wanted to learn how to heal from my trauma, live sober, and be a mom to Felix and Kennedy. This is dismissal charges. This is the certificate for completion of this program. I thought I was gonna die out on the streets, and for me to be here and be sober and have my kids is such a blessing, such a blessing. I have my kids in my life. That's the biggest thing. So I saw them, it's probably been about a year ago for the first time in 6 years. My mom brought them up, and we had no idea how they were gonna react. They were so excited to see me.
Oh, Crystal.
I will never forget that moment as long as I live. And we went and ate ice cream. And my mom just wanted to go slow, and I was like, okay, like, we can do this. And, so I just started. I remember before I saw them, I wrote them letters, and that was the hardest thing because I didn't get a reply back. But I didn't know what to say to them. I didn't know my kids anymore.
Coming out of a situation where she had experienced domestic violence, where she had experienced some trauma, where her kids were privy to what was going on in her life, it was really difficult for her to just step out of that and just rebound and go back to work and do the things that she needed to do without any services to wrap around. A lot of times when we tell these stories, we talk about the hardship of how it started, and then we quickly move to the end of how it finished. But there was a lot of life that she had to live in between that time.
We're at Hope, and we're in my office, and I am a recovery support specialist, and I work with DHS clients, drug court clients, mental health clients. My role here is a helper. Like, I help clients coming newly into sobriety, coming newly into court programs, figuring out how to stay sober, how to make it through their programs, how they get their children back, coping skills, take home to meetings, like basically anything I can to help them achieve what I've got and learn how to live life sober once they get out of these programs and getting their kids back. And this may sound weird, but I see homeless people more than I do people that are not because I know what it's like to be there.
I don't think it's weird at all. I think you see the story
Yeah.
behind the person.
When you really look and take a minute and look in someone's eyes and you can see the pain and the hurt, and they have a story. Everybody has a story, and everybody is somebody's brother or sister or mother, and life just hit them hard and they just didn't know how to deal with what happened, because that was me.
So getting to know their stories, getting to figure out specifically what the needs are for that person, because there is no one-size-fits-all answer to homelessness. It's a case-by-case situation, and for us to be able to help people move forward, we need to know what the specific need is that's facing them, that's the most high priority need for them.
There's two different worlds. There's what everybody lives in society, and then there's homelessness, and there's like this wall, but it needs to be connected. Like, we need to quit as a whole looking at these people like they're not there. They're no different than me, than you, than anybody.
I mean, would you agree that most everybody that's on the street is suffering from these
Yes.
co-factors,
Yes.
go-join
Yes.
factors
I mean,
of mental
substance
health
abuse,
and substance
mental health,
abuse?
domestic violence, it's trauma, like trauma. And addiction is just a symptom of that. That was my thing, was dealing with my trauma. Like, that's why I was getting high, so I could change how I felt. Well, when I was young, I didn't know that those were things I needed to fix on the inside. Like, I didn't know that. I know that now. So when you start going and dealing with the really, really hard issues inside, that's when it starts changing. That's when it started changing for me.
Thanks for sharing your story with us. Really great. Oh, so proud of you.
Thank you.
What is the value of a child being raised by their mother? Can we agree on the value of ending for one person the cycle of incarceration, addiction, or abuse, or poverty? Can we agree on the value of ending several of those cycles at once? This brings us to the challenge that lies before us. We either leverage every resource, every talent, and every influence we have towards ending these cycles of incarceration, marginalization, poverty, and oppression, or we are participating in their perpetuation.